we'll move on to public comments. Tracy, any public comments?
None.
Wow, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to number 4, consent agenda. Anything to remove from the consent agenda? Any items? Okay, hearing none, seeing none, we will move on to 5. Oh, we need a motion to
So
move the
moved.
consent agenda as it is.
So moved.
Moved by Janet,
Second.
second by Frank. Roll call.
Trustee Burson?
Aye.
Trustee Benetti?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
Trustee Hafsenberger?
Aye.
Trustee Millet?
Aye.
Trustee Muir?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Moving on to number 5, action items. A, motion to approve ordinance 25-20, imposing a municipal utility tax on persons engaged in the business of furnishing gas in the village of Campton Hills, Kane County, Illinois.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Burson, second by.
I'll second.
Trustee Muir. Okay. Any discussion?
Just briefly, pursuant to the discussion at the last village board meeting, this ordinance was amended to remove reference to the furnishing or providing of electricity. So it's simply for natural gas.
Okay. Roll call on action 5A.
Trustee Burson?
Aye.
Trustee Muir?
Aye.
Trustee Benetti?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
Trustee Hafsenberger?
Aye.
Trustee Millet?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Action item 5B, motion to approve ordinance 25-22, amending the Campton Hills Village Code regarding compliance with the Local Government Taxpayers Bill of Rights Act. Could I have a motion, please? Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Millet, second.
Second.
Trustee Burson? Okay, any discussion, questions?
Yeah, there is a, let me get back to it, please. Where we list the 3. Nope. I apologize. Where the hell are you?
Page 89 of the packet.
Yeah, I gotta get past the CAM stuff. Okay. The,
Amusement tax should have been removed
in,
from there.
yeah, no, that's not it. It says, I think it calls it, yeah. So, section 2D is in David, it says municipal utility tax, I think that is what it's called, but this is the gas tax, and the one above it we call electric utility tax. Do we want to add a clarifier so people can separate that this is the gas?
Yes, we can. It's just that was the title that we used for
Could you do in parens after? I know that's the actual title, what we called it.
municipal utility tax. So we can, to differentiate the two, we can probably change the title of the ordinance that was just passed to
Right. Yeah.
to say municipal utility tax, like dash gas.
Yeah, something like that. Because we wanted to make clear we weren't doubling up, so people would know.
Right,
Okay.
right. I mean, the language in the code will differentiate them, but the titles can be
Okay.
changed, so.
That's all I had.
If someone wants, you can approve this, approve this ordinance with number 3, so it would be 351B3, saying municipal utility tax dash gas. So
Yeah.
that change, and then take another vote on the prior motion to change that language so that the clerk can
They
indicate
match.
that in the ordinance.
Okay,
Yeah, so that they match.
So do this one and then go back to the previous one.
That's fine.
okay.
Okay, so you have a motion?
We'll vote this now, because that's what the motion on the floor, and then come back to it? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
with the amendment to indicate that. it
Yes,
would be-
as
We're keeping
amended
B the way
to-
it is.
It would, B3 would say municipal utility tax dash gas,
Yeah,
Okay,
Is the amendment?
is as the amendment.
Is amendment
yes,
motion?
to amend the motion.
Okay.
I amend, that's my, I
Okay.
moved to amend my own motion.
okay, and a
My
second
motion?
on that?
Motion.
Second.
Second by trustee Burson, and roll call?
Trustee Millet?
Aye.
Trustee Burson?
Aye.
Trustee Benetti?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
Trustee Hafsenberger?
Aye.
Trustee Muir?
Okay.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. We'll go
And then
back
and
to
then-
5A.
Yes, go
Yeah.
back so Mike can.
Can we
remove that.
reconsider 5A?
Sure,
Do we need a motion to reconsider?
Yes.
yes.
You should.
Motion to reconsider 5A?
Okay,
Second.
okay. Roll call?
Well,
We need to explain.
Yeah.
explain
you're
that
amending-
what's being reconsidered.
Well, no,
and
I'm,
changed.
do the
You're
recon-
amending the
when I,
title.
when I
Well-
remake the second, when I redo
Right.
the motion, we'll do it then,
Okay,
right?
okay,
Okay.
Do
yeah.
you have a second? Go ahead.
You can take a roll call now, no, reconsider.
Okay, roll call?
Reconsider. Okay, that was Mike. Trustee Millet?
Aye.
Trustee Burson?
Aye.
Trustee Benetti?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
Trustee Hatzenberger?
Aye.
Trustee Muir?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, move to, move to adopt ordinance O-2520, with, where did we say we're putting it? With the,
The title, Chapter 9, in colon, municipal utility tax, we could put a dash.
shall be municipal
gas
utility tax,
after that.
dash gas.
Yep,
Yep, that's my motion.
that'll work.
Okay, I need a second.
I'll second.
Second by Frank. Okay. Questions, discussion? Okay, roll call.
Okay, Trustee Millet?
Aye.
Trustee Benetti?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
Trustee Burson?
Aye.
Trustee Hatzenberger?
Aye.
Trustee Muir?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes, and thank you for that, Mike. Okay. Action item 5C, motion to approve ordinance 25-23, committing to a fiscal policy relative to revenue generated by certain municipal taxes. I'll entertain a motion.
And
I'll
before
move.
there's a motion on this, it
Mhm.
will be amended to indicate that Section 2D also reads municipal utility tax dash gas, which is the change we just made.
You're adding that to C?
So clarification.
Section 2D.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see, motion, Kim Muir?
Yeah.
Go ahead. And, go ahead. All right.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Janet. Discussion?
I think for clarity for the public and for the trustees, the purpose of doing this was to clarify and put with the fiscal policy to what already states in each of these user fee / taxes, new, that they will only be used for road capital. It does have language that it goes to the general fund, and then it's allocated down to the capital use for roads. That's the intent of this ordinance, and that's what it says. But it does list general fund, and then it's segregated into the road capital. That'll be a new, and that's the only place, only way this money can be expended by this fiscal policy is to say that it will be, all these user fees, new taxes, only go to road capital. It's not as direct as that, but that's legally what it's intended to say, right, Carmen?
Yeah, so this is just a backup for the language that's already in all of the ordinances that were approved at the last meeting and tonight, as we discussed at the last meeting. Similar to your stabilization reserve policy, the board felt it was appropriate to create a separate fiscal policy regarding the use of this tax revenue.
Okay, go ahead, Janet.
Can we get a little more clarification as to the route from collecting money through the general fund to roads and how and where it might be diverted?
I think this fiscal policy will make it crystal clear now and in the future, just like your fiscal policy on what our cash reserve unrestricted fund balance must be. It is going to be the rule that any future administrator, treasurer, or board has. These funds are directed to the capital account for roads, which will be a new subcategory in the general fund that is going to be created with this creation of this fiscal policy.
Thank you for that.
Okay,
If,
Kim?
if
go
I may,
ahead.
I would like to either add some language to that, that stipulates that, we get at least a quarterly report of the balance of that to make sure the money that's coming in is matching what the balance is, so that, and if it doesn't, then somebody needs to answer, and that report should, at the very least, go to finance, and possibly the board as well.
I believe we can add that to the requirement of this ordinance, that there be quarterly reports from the treasurer / administrator to any user fee monies, and show that the balance is now increased each time those funds get paid by the state to the village.
Maybe not. So currently, the ordinance and the policy reflect a regular reporting. It doesn't specifically say how often the reporting is, so it would, regular reporting by the village treasurer to the corporate authorities, which is all of you, the finance committee, and the public works committee of the village. So if you'd like to amend the term regular to a specific time frame, we can do that. But the reporting is in here now.
Maybe monthly, once it starts. I mean,
The monthly treasurer.
Sorry, yeah, we get a monthly treasury report, yeah.
yeah,
If
so-
it indicates monthly, then the internal policy would be to include it in the treasurer's report. So-
Okay.
So,
With that amendment.
so whoever made the motion, if they'd like to amend their motion to approve the ordinance with the replacement of the word regular, where it says regular reporting, with monthly reporting,
Okay,
we can do it that way.
all right. You made the motion?
All right, so a motion, amending the motion to change the wording of regular reporting to monthly reporting, and it could be in the finance committee, or the finance report.
Okay. All right, and who seconded that? That was
Janet?
Janet, okay. Second?
Yes,
All
second.
right. Any more discussion? Okay, roll call.
Trustee Muir?
Aye.
Trustee Burson?
Aye.
Trustee Benetti?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
Trustee Hefzenberger? Aye. Trustee Millet?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Yeah, thank you for that, Kim.
And Bill, we'd like to remove D.
Oh, yeah, I was going to pull D, discussion and consideration of a contract to provide repairs to Connors Road. We're going to get more estimates, so I'm going to pull that from today's meeting. Okay, we'll move on to 6, discussion items. A, proposed annexation agreement for property south of Route 38. Carmen, I think you'll take that for now, and then we'll have Dave come up in a few minutes.
Yes, so as you'll see in this evening's packet, you have a summary from myself regarding the proposed annexation agreement that was generally discussed at the last board meeting and is in line with the concept plan that was discussed by Mr. Petzelt from Shodine Construction Company. The memo is just a general overview of the higher level details. And then the draft annexation agreement is also included in the packet as well. This agreement is the culmination of probably the last, I'd say, 6 weeks or so or more of work from Administrator Rooney, myself, Mr. Petzelt, various representatives of other local agencies such as the fire districts, discussions with some other municipal entities, and then also many discussions and meetings with members of the LaFox Civic Organization and other open space groups and foundations. Besides the regular meetings that we've had, members of the groups have had other meetings as well to come up with these terms. The village, we began with a template annexation agreement. The village had a list of items that it wanted to include in the agreement that you see reflected here. And then we have gone back and forth through various drafts. So this is the current draft. Mr. Petzelt also prepared an updated version of the bubble plan that I sent to all of you, and you should have a copy as well today. All that's changed here is that those orange arrows show the access points onto the varying areas of the development that was someone asked for at the last meeting, I believe. So at this point, if you have any questions for myself or Administrator Rooney or Mr. Petzelt, he's here this evening on any issues related to the annexation and to the agreement. And then What we're looking for, as I indicated in the memo, is direction on, as to whether to move this agreement forward for action. Once we hammer out just some very minor final details, and then set this for a public hearing. So the way that the public hearing occurs, it would be here at a village board meeting. It can occur, right before or really in the middle of a village board meeting. We have time requirements, so 15 days prior to the agreement being considered at a public hearing, we have to publish in a local newspaper. And then 10 days prior, we have to send notice to varying members, representatives of Campton Township. The village doesn't provide fire service, doesn't provide library service, doesn't provide some other services that typically would require additional notice to other agencies. So really, we're notifying the township here. In this case, we have to have interaction with these other agencies because in some types of annexations, the annexing municipality takes over those services. If the village has a fire department, the fire district may lose tax revenue. If they have a municipal library, a library district might lose tax revenue. If they have a local public works department, the township might lose revenue for unincorporated roads that they maintain. In this case, the majority of the property that will have development on it, residential development, will be serviced by the Elbert Countryside Fire Protection District. So we've had several meetings with the chief and deputy chief there regarding potential location for a public safety building. The northern part, north of Mill Creek, the majority of it is the Fox River Countryside Fire Protection District, but there's an anticipation that no developments are going to be constructed on that. So any impact fee consideration likely would not be an issue here. As we've talked about before, the entirety of where the residential development is being proposed is in School District 304. The parties have had preliminary discussions with the superintendent there regarding any considerations that the developer would have to make in the PUD with regard to the district. So there's quite a few areas in this agreement. We've tried to address them all, but this is a preliminary step. If the annexation is approved, the agreement is approved, an ordinance would then immediately after that would be approved, annexing the property into the village. That would give the village the ability to review the plan unit development application, which I discussed at the last meeting. So this is the first step, and this is your opportunity to look at the agreement, see if you suggest any other revisions before we set it for a public hearing. We preliminarily had discussed that if the board was comfortable with the current form of the agreement, that we would try to set a hearing on the annexation agreement at the end of June. It really would be kind of the end of that, I think it's 4th week of June, 26th, I think was the
26th.
day. That would require publication by next Wednesday. But that's just, that's like a tentative date at this point. So.
Janet, go ahead.
Assuming that all of this continues to develop in a positive direction, I think we all hope that it's going to. If we were to develop a consensus tonight that we wanted to move this forward for action, is there anything that would prevent us from turning back at the next meeting if something unexpected were to happen?
Right, so it's a great question. The public hearing is just a statutory requirement, and it's meant for public input. The village board doesn't even have to approve the agreement at that meeting. It could approve it at a meeting any other day after that, and the statute and the public notice will make it very clear that the public hearing is meant for public input. The agreement can be amended. It can be completely replaced after the public hearing is held. Typically, there are some changes after the public hearing. Usually, there's not a complete replacement of the agreement, but even though the hearing's held, it doesn't mean that it has to be approved at a later date.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Dave, are you going to give a presentation this evening? I think you prepped one.
Good evening. For the record, David Patzelt, P-A-T-Z-E-L-T, 77 North First Street, Geneva, Illinois, 60134. I think pretty much has already been, everything has been addressed. I might just want to add a few tidbits, maybe some things that have been going on. I'd like to first say that as some of the public mentioned at the last meeting, this has really been a collaborative effort between us and the developer, the village staff, the consultants of the village, and the various public groups that have been associated with it. And I think it's been a terrific effort. A couple things to keep in mind that although this is in a, call it a transportation node with a train station, somewhat the whole of the donut, with the donut being the development around it. Although there is a transportation node there, this really is not a transportation-oriented development that you might see, or that is perhaps similar to what you see in the village of Elburn and our development there. This development is more focused on open space and the significant amount of open space that's happening within this development. And as such, the density, the overall density of this development is much lower than you would find in a typical transit-oriented development. So completely, I would say, completely different type of development. There are some ongoing meetings. I think the village attorney has mentioned meeting with the fire department, just so you know that there has been some discussions between, I may have mentioned in a prior discussion about KDOT not allowing access onto Bunker Road, and meetings with myself and staff, KDOT and the fire department. There's a resolution that the KDOT is permitting emergency vehicle access out of the fire station directly onto Bunker Road at an acceptable location. We think we have that location. There has been a proposed site plan of that location. That location would require returning fire vehicles to access that site through the Metra parking lot. So KDOT is scheduled to meet with Metra tomorrow, in fact, to confirm that Metra does not have any issue with those returning vehicles to access the proposed fire station. There are some discussions also ongoing that the village attorney did not mention, perhaps, of the Park District. The Geneva Park District had an annexation agreement in 2007 for the southerly portion, or south of the Mill Creek, generally the township line or the Mill Creek Greenway. I've been in discussions with the Geneva Park District, and we're scheduled to meet with them again next week. And then lastly, I know there was some brief discussion about the sewer and water service to the proposed development. Although we believe that we'd like to have the Mill Creek Water Reclamation District provide that service. I have met with the board. There's been some further additional information gathered that is going off to the board, and we are scheduled to start meeting with their district engineer and the district attorney. So those are some of the things ongoing behind the scenes, a lot of moving parts, and I'm sure a lot more discussion and more updates for the village board as the project moves forward. But that kind of concludes my additional points, but I'm available for any questions that might come up as we continue through this evening. Thank you.
Any questions for Dave before I, okay, Janet?
Just one. Relative to the Geneva Park District, some of the, I think you were pretty, as I recall, pretty clear with us last time that there was some internal open space in the areas that are built out. So it's not just the large open space tracts, but there is some internal open space in each of these neighborhoods, correct?
That you're 100% correct, and we hope to reach an agreement with the Geneva Park District, as we have done in other developments with the Geneva Park District, where we can reach an agreement where those open spaces within call it neighborhoods of the development, perhaps are owned by the Geneva Park District, and then.
Or somehow under their jurisdiction. It's those areas that they're concerned with. It's, because the area up to the north is not their jurisdiction, right? In
So
Camden Township.
I'd want to be careful when we say jurisdiction, so I don't know if you can see my cursor moving on the screen here.
Yes?
That line is really the demarcation
Yes.
line, where north of that is the St. Charles Park District, south of that is the Geneva Park District.
That's also the township boundary, right?
Correct. So those two, technically, both those park districts have some jurisdiction, whether that is open space or it is developed land. And village attorney has made mention that as part of the annexation process, you have to notify various districts. Those are an example of two other districts. So I guess I just want to caution you when you say that even though it's open space, they don't have any jurisdiction.
No, I wasn't
that-
suggesting that at all. No, I understand that they do have jurisdiction within their boundaries
Yes.
entirely.
Correct.
My only other question is, I thought I understood before, and that even within the neighborhood areas, the park areas in the neighborhoods, these were relatively passive, open space areas still, and you were not envisioning significant active recreation facilities. And there may be, park swings, this type of thing, but not pools or field houses or soccer fields with lights or anything like that.
That would be our intent, that we don't foresee any large lit or lighted soccer fields, baseball diamonds, things of that sort. However, with it being the Geneva Park District's jurisdiction, they're really the experts in programming their open space throughout their district, and we really rely on them to say and suggest what is needed within their district and within this community. So I not want to tell the Geneva Park District, no, you can't have a swing set, or no, you can't have a drinking fountain, or no, you can't have a t-ball field or something of that sort. So
Sure.
we really rely on their expertise of how they believe that they need to plan their recreational amenities within their district.
I was getting more at the notion of trying to minimize the impact fees, to the extent that the vision didn't include a significant amount of active recreation that would imply larger investment and larger ongoing maintenance costs.
So to those costs, what we've done in other communities is, with the Geneva Park District specifically, we have placed, we'll say 25 cents on the table. The Park District has placed 25 cents on the table, so we're matching funds. And then the Park District would go off and try to get an IDNR grant for the remaining 50 cents to make up that dollar. We usually cap those at our contributions so that we're not building community swimming pools, large recreational fitness centers, and things of that sort. So I don't expect those and don't foresee those within this community. But other semi-active parks, they're very well would be or could be, and actually we would hope there would be some of those within the development areas. But again, we really rely on, I'm going to call them the professionals. We're developers, home builders. We're not recreational planners for the actual activities within the development. Hopefully that helps and explains it. But again,
Thank you very much.
we don't have an agreement yet with the Park District. We need to work through that, and our hope is that the 25 cents, 50 cents is the goal that we've used in other developments, and would hope that they would consider that again.
Okay. Mike, go ahead.
I'd say to continue on that specific point, I mean, Geneva Park District has the Peck Road Recreation Area. They're not gonna build another recreation facility anywhere near here, because they would be just competing with themselves. If the deal goes down where the open spaces eventually goes to the forest preserve, that's moot. So you're really looking at tot lots and those sorts of things that would be within the development, which, you're being nice, Dave, but you as a builder want to have those amenities for helping sell those houses too. But you don't want, you're not going to sell a house with a soccer stadium next to it, that's a detriment. But a tot lot in the cul-de-sac area, people want that. So I'm not that concerned about what goes on within the bubbles, because some of that stuff should be within those bubbles. And if Geneva Park District wants to maintain that, that's fantastic. I could also see Geneva Park District saying, I don't want it, let your HOA do it. And so both of those, I think, are reasonable options, but it's a good point to bring up. Thanks for letting us know, but I'm still thinking it's okay to go ahead with it.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other discussion or questions for Dave? Okay, Mike, you make a motion to move this
So
to action item?
we are, okay, so that's what we want to do?
June
Okay.
26th?
So we were just talking about this, we have to clarify our board rules here. I think, so, to make sure that everybody realizes, right, we want to move this to an action item at the next board meeting or to a date specific of?
Date specific.
Okay, so,
Yes.
date specific of June 26th, so I move,
A special meeting on June
okay.
26th.
I move that we move this to an action
Mike,
item, date
can I-
specific.
Can I
Go.
interrupt? Can I make one comment? In relation to Norton Lakes, and if we're going to do this on the 26th, what are the chances of that issue being resolved by then?
I think it
Because-
should be resolved in the next meeting, right?
It should.
Yeah.
I've had discussion with the developer, which is not Shodine, they're the builder, for some of those issues that are outstanding at the HOA.
Yeah, I just don't want the 26th to be a circus-type environment. To try to avoid that, if we can get that resolved in any possible way, I think I would highly recommend that.
Yes. Trustee Millet, in his day job, has put me in contact with the right lawyer.
Who ignored, didn't know, he misunderstood what I said, but, you know,
But we got it done.
you got it done, all right, okay. So,
Okay, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't have a question for Dave, but I do have a comment, question for the board. On 7D, sidewalk, stormwater, and street-related improvement, seems like this is kind of a unique agreement, different from like Norton Lakes or Fox Mill, in that this SSA will give us now responsibility of maintenance for the sidewalks, the streetlights, the curbs. The first portion of this paragraph states that we take now responsibility. The SSA is going to provide us the funding to maintain all of that. And I was curious if there was a reason why we're taking responsibility, where we had been curb to curb. Now we are expanding into sidewalks, curbs, and streetlights versus the HOA having the responsibility to maintain those items.
Well, the concern was that the construction of these public improvements would create a larger burden on the village without a local property tax to repair, replace, or maintain essentially the road system. So that the understanding or the agreement of the parties was to create an active SSA over these specific properties within the four corners of the development, so that those properties were assessed or taxed for this specific maintenance. So the work is still going to be performed by the township because it's a village road system, but the funding to perform the repairs or eventual replacement will come directly from the SSA.
And to the point that trustee Benetti made with the issues that have arisen with the HOA having those responsibilities and not having the means to address it properly with the developer, we're getting the developer to agree to an active SSA in lieu of a village property tax for those assessments, so the village will have the funding to maintain, and we won't have a repeat of some of these, whether it be Fox Mill before there was a village, or Norton Lake when they wrote it to be curb to curb and then leaving it to the HOA. This is effectively making it an active HOA with PIN numbers with the associated tax, as you were, in the SSA form for those issues to be addressed with a funding source that's not our village property tax or out of the village general fund. So it's kind of as a relationship to Norton Lake to not have that same thing occur where we have a lack of responsibility or funding.
So outside of just the maintenance side, do we assume liability for the sidewalks, meaning, you know?
We
someone
have liability
trips?
now.
Right.
That's the downside. We have liability now in
Right.
Fox Mill.
And no funding.
Right.
But that's
so-
the HOA's responsibility.
Still our liability, though, 'cause it's in the right of way.
Yeah, within the right-of-way,
Okay.
it would be considered the village's liability, depending on how the, where
knew
the
that.
sidewalks are located here and whether or
Oh,
not
okay,
they're
sorry.
considered common areas or common improvements for the HOA versus village-owned sidewalks, then there would be a difference in liability there. But yes, it would be part of the village's municipal street system, just because the maintenance of it is funded by an SSA that's collected against those properties does not remove the liability from the village. I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole about liability on streets, but it's,
Sure.
I mean, it's, if you have a regular repair system in place and it's an intended user of the street, or not an intended user of the street, you typically don't have liability. It's pretty hard to prove a pothole case against a municipality, but this will make it even easier for the village to be able to assess the condition and, more importantly, pay for any repairs in a timely basis. So.
Okay.
And
just
then
wanted
there's
to
that
make
backup SSA as well, on the privately owned open spaces that's included here, just as a fail-safe.
Thank
So-
you.
So in the sense of why we had the user fees to have a capital program for roads, this won't add to that burden because it'll be established early on from day one. So we don't have that burden increase our already underfunded road program.
Okay, Janet, go ahead.
All right. So firstly, I'll offer the second.
Okay,
Now
we
we
go.
get into discussion.
It occurs to me with the conversations that we've had, multiple meetings now about Norton Lakes, that there's a gray area between curb to curb and sort of lawn to lawn, right? Because there's sidewalks and parkway and curbs and, and streetlights and all these other things. And so I'm glad that we're trying to, I appreciate Trustee Boatner's concern as to whether we are expanding our scope. But as Trustee Millette said, we're already stuck with it anyway. So I'm glad that we're considering a funding mechanism, an enforceable funding mechanism, to make sure that these things are taken care of. Because the HOA method, which was, how much of suburban America was built over the last 30 or 40 years, isn't necessarily up to task with some of these things, the way the boundaries are drawn.
I agree, and we've had many discussions in our weekly meetings regarding you making it very clear when it comes time for the PUD, a review and approval, and then engineering, especially specifically defining, reducing gray area, indicating, okay, this particular improvement is a village responsibility or will be a private responsibility, which can be tricky when you have stormwater improvements, traversing streets or alongside streets, inside, outside the right-of-way. So that's going to be on our radar for sure.
Go ahead, Mike.
To the extension of both of those concepts, we have the issue, and we've been dealing with some of the regular areas of town where we have that, what's private stormwater, public stormwater, all that stuff. So having the ability to get that set up, like right now, this is all we're going to maintain, this is what the HOA will maintain, is going to be, whoever succeeds us will be very happy that was done, at least for this area. And then subsequently to that, to your question that started this thread, Trustee Boatner, we still have not engaged Fox Mill about having to do curb work and sidewalk work actively in their association when we need to, because that's gonna be, you know, in their minds, they're looking at, okay, I am paying my dues to run the pool, I'm paying my dues for the gazebos, and then we have to say, yeah, well, your dues are actually also supposed to help these things, these sidewalks and these curbs, and that's why we haven't gotten out to do as many of your streets as we wanted to. And when we have to do the ADA improvements that's required when we use MFT on certain things, we could talk about you know, and I think we've, in generalized terms in Public Works, we said, okay, well, the ADA helps everybody, we'll foot that part of it on the common funds, but, you know, the rest of it that goes in front of just certain homes, that's gonna have to come out of the HOA. Here, you've already got the funding set. And whether we do it by a contract that we would let ourselves for a sidewalk contract, or we would have the township let a sidewalk contract, I think that's just the mechanism how it gets it done. But as far as the curbs, when the time comes for those, it's gonna be part of the road project, and the money will be there for the curbs and storm sewers too, because that's the other component that we have in Fox Mill that for the most part, we had some issues early on we had to fix. We fixed them as the village because it was part of the greater good sort of thing. But they were definitely within, you know, the level of service that Fox Mill gets, the way they were built versus the level of service I get where I just have a ditch. So I kind of like this. This would be great if we would have had this back when Fox Mill was developed.
And to the
interrupt?
point, I was gonna jump
Well,
in.
well, you can, but we never made the motion. I stopped the motion when I talked about Norton Lake, so.
No, he made the motion, and then Janet seconded it. So now we've got a motion and a second to move it to action on 26 June, right, Tracy?
No, as Mike started making the motion,
Oh,
Frank
did-
jumped in
That's-
about
yeah,
Norton Lake.
that's-
Yeah.
Okay, per us actually following our procedures, which we need to talk about. Because
Well, let's,
I will move, someone wants to talk?
let's let Mark say what he
Well,
was gonna say. And then,
To the issue that you mentioned, we have an HOA that has to address stuff at Fox Mill. When Scott gets up to address some roads issues, he can give an update on that possibility at that point. I wanted to make sure that the trustees are aware. I've tasked him to do some
Okay.
work on that. But yes, I think we gotta get the motion down.
okay, Mike, floor is yours.
Okay, I move that we advance this to the active agenda for special meeting on June 26, 2025.
Item, and
I'll second.
second, second by Frank, okay. Any other discussion, questions?
And staff will do all the proper notification.
Sure,
Yes,
Sure.
that's correct.
okay, roll call.
That's just consensus.
Consensus, beautiful, all right.
Yes, not action.
All right, do I have a consensus to move forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank
And
you.
Just so I can confirm, we have the meeting on the 26th, there will be no meeting on the 17th? Or will there be a meeting?
June.
You know, on the 17th, I hope to be able to address trustee Benetti's question about Norton Lake with the lawyer that represents Hank and as the developer of Norton Lakes.
So we'll keep that.
And if we do the rest of our regular business, then we can solely dedicate that meeting to just this
Perfect.
topic if we get
Annexation.
some folks, yeah.
Great.
Okay. Moving on, we'll move on to 6B, Village Building Code Update, and that will be Seth from Fire Safety.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for having me here tonight. I did come a little while ago, and so I'm back to see you guys again. Here to talk about the exciting code update for the Village of Campton Hills. So let's get pumped, everybody. So as most of you are probably aware, the Village of Campton Hills is on some older edition of the building codes, specifically the 2012 edition. Beginning this year, the state of Illinois has required all municipalities be on at least the 2018 edition of all of the building codes. And so in an effort to meet that requirement, as well as update the code requirements for the latest standards and technologies that have been developed over the past decade or so. The Village of Campton Hills is looking to come up to the latest version of the codes. Some of the reason that you're going to the newer codes, the latest edition, is one, to meet the state requirements, two, to incorporate all the latest technology and construction standards that have been taking place over all of the years since the 2012 code was adopted here in Campton Hills. Some of the amendments and adoption will allow rehabs on properties to happen easier. This will be more designer and contractor friendly. The newer code editions have been redesigned and reformatted to be easier to understand, better laid out, better formatted. So that's going to help there. The latest codes incorporate the latest environmental conditions, so wind data that has happened over the past decade plus, soil data, and snow load data. So you've got all these things that have happened with the climate change and everything that are now incorporated into the latest codes. So when things are built and designed, they're able to stand loads such as wind loads and snow loads, so that stuff doesn't fall over or collapse or anything like that. The newer codes also address energy storage systems, which are becoming more popular. That is related to solar panels on roofs that you see on residential developments. There's also battery storage systems that function as backup power for homes. Those are now in the code. And then it will also reference the latest fire protection standards and life safety requirements. So again, codes get developed over time, and codes are actually a result of tragedies and bad things happening. If you go back to the old days of codes, you had, a book this thick. And now the building codes, if I were to stack them all up, are like this big. I mean, there's just so many things that have happened over history. So the codes get updated every 3 years, essentially. And so by going to the latest edition of the codes, Campton Hills will be, up to speed. Developers, such as Shodine and other folks will be building to the latest standards. A lot of architects and designers are already looking at designing things to meet these codes because they are the best practices that have been done throughout the industry. So really, those are the reasons that Campton Hills is looking to update to the latest edition of the codes. And so I'm here to answer any questions you may have, anything like that.
If you would address the amendments that we're going to.
Okay, yeah.
That we have, staff and you as fire safety consultant, as our contractor, have
Yeah,
really
thank you.
familiar with what we need as
Yeah,
local
thank you.
amendments.
Yeah, so as Mark said, and thank you, I did want to mention that. So I've personally been working with Campton Hills for about 8 years with my current company and the previous company I was with. So I'm very familiar with construction out this way, worked a lot with the developers, contractors, the building division. Tracy's back, so working with her again. And so what fire safety has done is we really took the amendments that Campton Hills had, and we kept let's call them the ones that make sense, the ones that are developed standards in Campton Hills and have been for years. We also cleaned up the language, the format, made it more enforceable, made it more legally sound, and we've also cleaned up the references that are in conflict with village practices. So some of the things that the village has been doing over the years was not actually in the code, and so now those things are addressed and in the code, such as what things require permits, and just for a small example. So we've done the due diligence, talking with developers over time, incorporating the latest construction standards, and working with the village to just basically refresh these code updates, reference the latest code standards, and I hope the document was shared with everybody, and it doesn't make for easy reading or anything like that, but it's a lot of technical language, but if you have any questions on any of the amendments that are in there or want to talk about that, you know,
If
I'm
you
here.
would, fire always comes up on what requires sprinklers and what doesn't.
Okay, so you want to go there, huh?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that is always,
It touches every community I've
yeah,
ever worked in.
yeah. Okay, so Campton Hills essentially maintained the same standards, but let's talk about what those standards are, okay? So residential construction, new single-family homes do not require fire sprinkler systems. Although that has been in the code now going all the way back to 2006, they've been incorporated, but, you know, Campton Hills and a lot of surrounding communities opt out of that, which is the right of every municipality can adopt any codes they want and make any amendments they want, so what suits the community. So single-family homes, no sprinklering requirements. Duplexes, not that any duplexes will be built here, but you never know, do not require sprinkler systems. Townhouses do require sprinkler systems, and a townhouse is defined as 3 or more units attached to each other. So you can picture like row houses, they're commonly known as. You've got, you know, vertical walls, fire walls separating each unit. So those do require sprinkler systems in them, which is already in Campton Hills code. And then on the commercial side of construction, again, not that Campton Hills has a lot of commercial development going on, but you never know. So most building types, when they're over 3,000 square feet, will require a sprinkler system. So it does allow small offices or small garage buildings, accessory structures on commercial property to be developed without requiring sprinkler systems. But it does require sprinkler systems on, if there were apartment buildings, hotels, those would require sprinkler systems. If you had institutional uses such as a hospital, a jail, places that people can't get out in case of an emergency, those things are gonna be sprinklered. So really, those are the standards that Campton Hills had in place, which are about par for course for most surrounding communities. It's more strict than the code itself, but it is on par with what Campton Hills has been doing and the surrounding communities do as well. So really no changes at all to the fire protection requirements.
Okay. All right. Questions, Janet? Go ahead.
My first question, relative to the last statement that you made, is does our municipal jail facility located right on the other side of this row of closets here require a sprinkler system under this?
What do you think? Should it?
I'm thinking you're gonna say yes.
Yes, it does, yes. Yeah, this building is sprinklered. You see the
Yeah.
little heads in the.
Yes.
So once it's required in just any part of the building, the whole building has to have
Right,
it. So
great,
yeah,
thank
all
you.
those, yeah.
So, but the more substantive questions I had were related to the property maintenance code and also the residential building code, as it concerns our residents who are applying for building permits. And you had mentioned specifically building permits that the village requires or doesn't require relative to what these two code documents require. And so this has been a topic of conversation for 2 years now that has not really quite come to the floor.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not sure that there is a consensus yet on the board for what requires a permit and what doesn't. And I think that's a topic that really needs to be explored before all of this is approved. The other comment that I would make is that, you know, as everyone would like to drive around the village and look this way, look that way, you know, forward, everywhere you look, and see everyone's properties beautifully maintained. We'd all love for that to be the case. And I think, you know, 99% of property owners would like to be the ones that are maintaining their properties that way. Doesn't always happen for lots of different reasons. And I'm concerned that the most recent property maintenance code is more aggressive in terms of what is expected from our residents. And so, while of course we would like them to maintain their property to the highest possible standard, in general, our resources are limited, and our focus has been on health and safety. And some of these things don't feel like they're health and safety.
Okay. So thanks, Janet, for the questions. I will do my best to answer them. So as far as when permits are required, I understand there may be, and that is another, besides fire protection, that's another hot topic, if you will, in communities, like when is a permit required? Essentially, Campton Hills is going to maintain the same permitting requirement. It's just now written down of what they're doing. So the things that weren't included, like driveways, sidewalks, fences, for example, the way that the code was adopted, fences were exempt from permits. But we all know that we require permits for fences here in Campton Hills. I can vouch for reviewing many of them over the years. So it was just codifying what was missing, even though it's now matching the practices that Campton Hills has always done. So if there are some items that you have questions on what stuff requires a permit, essentially repairs and maintenance, those things aren't going to require permits. It's not getting any more strict, it's just getting clear, okay? So I guess before I move on to the next answer, do you have specific things that were like a concern of what requires a permit, what doesn't?
I don't have a question. I think I have a pretty good idea what the village expects, and I think that I think we're expecting permits for more things than we ought to. I believe Trustee Millette recently paid for a permit for windows on his home. And you and I didn't talk about it particularly, but I heard just in the wind that you kind of wondered, why is there even a permit for, required for something like that when the opening hasn't changed or anything? Now, obviously, if the opening's gotten bigger or something, there's a whole different set of issues. But if all you're doing is swapping these windows out for those windows, as Trustee Boatner has illustrated, discussed many times before, isn't this ultimately a conversation between you and your contractor as to how nice windows you want and what quality of work you're willing to accept for the dollar and so forth? And why do we have permits for this? Why do we have permits for front doors? Why do we have permits for siding? Why do, we have permits for a variety of plumbing and electrical work that happens out at the end of the chain. It's not, obviously, if you're getting a, new breaker box or something, that's a permit. But it's not, I'm not sure that it's clear why permits would be needed for some of these things that are repair or replacement items as it's listed in our code today. And so we won't solve it tonight, but I think it's a good discussion point for the board about what things we really think should and shouldn't require permits. Because I think there's a pretty good consensus on the big items that should. I don't think you're going to have a fight on driveways and roofs and and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's a long list of other items, and one of the things that again has been demonstrated well in the past is that most people don't get permits for most of the other things, and so.
I'm shocked.
Yeah,
What?
I know. And so if it turns out that 90 or 95% of our residents don't get a permit when they replace their furnace, why would we say in our code that we require residents to get a permit to replace their furnace?
Okay. I mean, it's like, why do you drive the speed limit down the road if no cops are watching you?
No,
like,
it's really, it's rather different,
Yeah,
I think, actually. I understand the analogy, but I think it's quite different.
Yeah, so if I can try and address most of those items, I will, because we do want to move these codes forward because it's going to benefit everybody. And to get on these permit requirements such as windows, for example, Mike, you had your windows replaced and you might be wondering why you needed a permit. Maybe you understand why, but I guess for the, benefit of the room and people that are tuning in, if they are, window replacements may sound like a simple thing, right? You have windows like these windows here. If I'm putting the same size in, why do I need a permit? Well, there's a few reasons. One, if you're replacing bedroom windows, that's an emergency escape. If there's a fire in the house, how are you getting out if you can't go out of your bedroom door? You're gonna have to use the window, right? Those windows are required to be a certain type of operation, a certain size, and so we gotta make sure that they're not getting smaller. We gotta make sure that they open properly. We gotta check those things. Also, the state has adopted the latest, the 2021 version of the energy code. And so we also need to make sure these windows are energy efficient, meeting those requirements. Ultimately, that's going to protect the homeowner from higher energy bills. Putting in insulated windows that meet the standards are now going to save energy for homeowners. So if you don't get a permit for those things, who's to say that it's going to be safe and energy compliant? Just for windows, for example. Front doors, how do you get out of your house every day? If it's not the back door, it's the front door, right? So there's certain size requirements, certain function requirements. If I put 18 deadbolts on my front door and there's an emergency, how am I going to get out? We check these things. So you get a permit to make sure you're putting in the right size door, and then you do an inspection to make sure it was installed properly. So permits and inspections protect the homeowners and the people occupying these properties. The codes are there to set safety standards as well as energy code standards. And so essentially the reason for permits is to verify before somebody puts something in that it's going to comply with the codes, and then afterwards we inspect it to make sure that it's installed properly and safe for everybody that's using it. So I hope that clarifies a little bit the couple examples that you had, but I think this is something that, comes up a lot. And we could probably split hairs all day on what stuff should and shouldn't require a permit. But I think I haven't heard many, if any, complaints in the longest time about the things that require a permit. And then let me double back to people doing stuff without permits. Just because people do stuff without permits doesn't mean you shouldn't require a permit for things. Again, like you gave the example of furnaces being replaced without permits. The homeowner is taking a risk by not getting a permit that it's going to be installed properly. There's electrical systems that are tied to these things. Gas, this is supplying air to the house that you're living in. It's air conditioning, it's heating, it's a water heater. That's another example. People do that. You've got pressure building up in this tank that, if it's not installed properly, could cause some major damage. So we're talking, these permit fees are very low cost. Mike, I don't know the cost of your window permit, for example, but the furnace replacements, the water heater permits are in line with what the industry standard is. They're pretty low cost, but they provide a high level service to your residents. You want your residents to have safe, code compliant installations. If you stop doing that, it's just like the broken window analogy that is used in policing. You start to let things go and it just snowballs. So you gotta have some standards, you gotta have some basis. And I know I sound like I'm on a soapbox a little bit because this is what I do, but I'm passionate about it. So I'm just trying to dispel why do we really need permits? And there's many reasons why, and I hope I addressed most of them, but if anybody.
You've really just adopted what the practice currently has been in Campton Hills.
Yes.
You're not saying we should eliminate or add. No. You're just taking the reality. If the village board, that's why we're having this discussion for the second or third time, is to make sure the board is fully cognizant of what work you're doing on their behalf.
Right.
And
Right.
if we do an adoption of the code, it's adopting what we currently have with amendments. If we're going to change anything, this is why I brought Seth again, to
Yeah.
trigger everybody's mind. If they're going to want to change or eliminate, it gives you that opportunity to think about it and give direction to the staff, so before we do the full adoption. action item, that we have it the way the majority of 7 of you want it.
Mike, go ahead. Nick,
Thank you,
you're
Madam
next.
President. Specific, so for townhome sprinklers, is it the whole townhome, or is it the kitchen and the utility room?
It's the whole townhouse,
Okay.
but it's not to the level of a commercial establishment. So
Right.
there are some exemptions such as bathrooms, closets, and it's run off the domestic system.
Okay.
So it's pretty low impact.
So then our 900s that are current, they reference NFPA 13, I think that's would be whatever we want to go up to then. 5-pound safety factor, all that stuff, I think.
Right.
Okay. So to the end of asking for direction to what we need to see, obviously at some point we need to see what we're proposing to be the actual wording of the local amendments and changes. And I'm looking at the last one, and probably you gave a brief, thank you, for changes in energy code and stuff that's probably not, was thought about in 13, but not quite, to kind of let us know if I were a resident, what I should expect going forward. And then, of course, more importantly, to my one certification away of becoming a master code official.
Nice.
Cohabitation of my domicile will hammer me left and right when this comes through.
Yes.
Is to be really how we can get this close enough to the residents on the quote-unquote one-pager. We're not going to be able to do a one-pager on it, but I think we need to have a good summary, good something like that. Maybe something video or something like that where, if you're interested in one part of it, you can go to what's new in the, light and vent, but what's new in energy compliance, et cetera. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I agree. Educating the public and your residents on what's coming forward is, a great idea. Obviously, contractors and developers need to know this stuff too because they're developing drawings and things, and you need to get the word out. So depending on when this gets through the process, we do want to also be cognizant of when it takes effect, right? So you want to give a cushion of time where you have time to get the education out there. If you put something on your website, have flyers at the front counter, you can do email blasts. I don't know if you have subscribers to any channels that you guys have, that kind of stuff. So you can get the word out there. And what makes this a little more unique is Campton Hills is going from the 2012 to the 2024. That's 5 code additions later. So you can imagine there's literally thousands of changes every year that happen. So compound that over time. So we're not going to publish a ton of pages on that, but we can come up with a several page document, let's say, understanding that a one pager is probably not sufficient. But generally speaking, there are no major changes. I mean, nothing crazy, nothing like, oh my God, it just incorporates the latest technologies. It covers things that may not have been covered before. It's a result of tragedies and things that have happened, so now it's meant to be safer and more protecting of people that use buildings and structures. So it's,
And Seth, you
yes.
guys touched, there's been national standards of unfunded mandates that were familiar from the state,
Yes.
but they're also federally.
Yes.
Some things have changed, and those, I think you got to address what's mandated, and
Yeah, so what Campton Hills has to do as opposed to what they're choosing to do, like we talked about, the state law requires you be on a newer edition of the code. That has to do with FEMA requirements as well. The state was doing that so that if, something happens where there's a FEMA declaration of a disaster, that FEMA assistance will actually fund things because you have the latest codes adopted. So that's something to keep in mind for the community as well. So those are the things that we can put together, as well as significant changes that, the everyday person may see as an impact, which are going to be relatively minor in nature, just as an FYI. So this is not reinventing the wheel. This is just getting to the latest standards, complying with state regulations, trying to be more developer and business friendly. And I know, you know, there's always going to be people that complain about anything that you do. And you guys are trustees. This happens, right? There's not everybody's going to be happy with this, but what you're doing is improving the community, being compliant with state regulations, meeting federal mandates, everything like that. So really, we just want to tell the story of why Campton Hills is doing it, put together a summary. You know, I definitely help with that and help with some outreach. I will stop there because I could go on all night. So, yeah, next question.
I think one more question. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, thank
A
you.
comment, yeah.
Comment, question, proposal. What my comment was I would like to see at our next meeting, 3-3-1, which is our permit fee schedule, and building and related activities. If we could add that to the agenda as a discussion item, and go through these things, have a little bit of time to prepare. Because while I do appreciate everything that you brought to the table, the fact is there's certainly some bias, right? You represent a company that
Oh, yeah.
issues permits,
I
right?
sure, I understand that, yeah.
Sure, sure. So this is your living. The more permits, the better. And I think that what we need to do is really balance, you know, our community and the needs of our community with all of the safety and everything that comes out of these extensive building codes. I do think there's some room for improvement. I have stated it several times. Whatever the process is, if we can achieve that tonight, having that on the
Well,
agenda
I think
for the next meeting.
What
or
you're
if-
asking for at the next meeting.
I would. I'd like
before
to
we
have it as a
adopt-
discussion prior to adopting this,
Yes,
that we go through
the
3-3-4.
what requires a permit and what doesn't, and
Yeah.
what those fees would be.
Yes.
Because he's only taking what exists, he's not.
Understood. I think we should get it all knocked out before we adopt that.
agree.
And we could also get the data on the surrounding northwest or Kane County, DeKalb, what is required, so we're like our neighbors, if you want to be like your neighbors, that, and you can see what you're an outlier on versus what your standard, so that would be helpful probably as well.
It would to a point, I think, but I've also seen some issues with trying to be like other communities and other things where we've compared. You know, I just feel like we are consistently very unique in a lot of the discussions that we have and the way we operate. So to an extent, that could be helpful. But my intention would not be to copy any other village's permit fee schedule.
Well, that was my suggestion, not to copy necessarily, just to answer the question, are we more restrictive than our neighbors? I mean, that's generally, I think, part of the thing we've wanted to be is we don't want to be the crazy one. We want to make sure, but if everybody else is doing it, doesn't mean we have to, I agree. But if we do it and none of them are doing it, that's kind of what I want to know.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, so are you asking us to prepare any information? Because depending on what the scope is, that may take some time to put together, so I just want to clarify what your expectations are at the next meeting. If it's discussing the permit fees and what requires a permit, that's pretty easy, and
We could do that in the July, regular scheduled meeting in July, is that what you're asking for? Is there a consensus to do it then?
I mean, we could do it on June 26th. I mean, it seems like special meetings, we add a lot of other stuff to them, so it's.
Well, I think we're focused on the
Okay.
annexation then, and I
Yeah,
need to
let's
make
do
sure we get
July.
all the data. That,
Okay.
if-
July?
If July is okay.
And I don't
July.
know that we need fire safety or not, I don't know.
No, I think they would help us with staffing the complete list of what we currently have in the code. And he's got the capacity to see what all the surrounding communities, yay or nay, have that permit requirement. And if our fees are in line, because I think that's,
Less concerned about the fees and more what
What's
we are not requiring.
yeah. So we'll get that full list, and that way you have time to look at it. I won't give it to you the week of the July meeting, and hopefully I get to you right after the 4th of July at the latest, so that everyone's got a clear list, and then you can discuss before the meeting, as long as you don't do it more than 2 people on an email chain to the officer that compliance with Open Meetings Act. But you just be careful of that and don't do a reply all.
Is
Just do
that
it.
enough time for you, Seth? No? July?
What day is it in July?
What's our meeting dates?
Third Tuesday of July.
Yeah, that's plenty of time.
Okay.
We'll get something out
Thank
right
you.
after the 4th,
Yeah.
so you can discuss it.
Thank you for that clarification.
And if there's no other questions, I think that's been the point, I think, that trustee Boatner has made in the past. What is a permit and what fees are we charging? Does it make sense? So we'll do that.
Yes. So we'll put together, I want to make this clear because I hate not meeting people's expectations. So we're going to tell you what things do and don't require a permit, like a general
Right.
summary of what Campton Hills does and will be doing. We will compare let's say the common debatable, is a permit required or not, types like the furnace replacement, the water heater, the windows. There's a few other ones that are, some municipalities that, may not require permits for that stuff, but we'll compare it with surrounding communities, because I agree, you don't have to or want to necessarily be like your surrounding communities. You want to do what's best for you and your residents, right? You care about them and what happens for them. So, but it's nice to see what's going on around you, right? Just, hey, are we missing something? Like, is everybody doing something we're not? It might spur some ideas for you, give you some better ideas. And then as far as the permit fees go, that I would say that's going to be really difficult to get some good information on, because I will tell you that every community does permit fees differently. And some of them are so complicated, you can't even figure out how to calculate a permit fee. And so I will do my best within that time frame to get a few surrounding communities on what their fee schedules are. But just for what it's worth, the hundreds of communities that I do work in, the permit fees in Campton Hills are pretty much in line with everybody else. And I know, again, we're not trying to be everybody else, but some of your contractors may give you feedback on that as well. I don't know if you want to seek any input from them. Of course, it's their benefit to get lower permit fees, right? But essentially what you're trying to do with permit fees is you're trying to be reasonable with the cost that the village incurs to perform those services, right? So you've got the plan review, the inspections, the administration. So you need to be covering your costs for those things. So
That's right.
all being said, I feel like your fees are pretty much right on. Like, you guys don't have the extra impact fees and the crazy, like when you do developments in other communities, those new home permits can cost $20,000, $30,000. Yours are not that much. So I think you're pretty good on that, but it's worth talking about. I don't know what all of your individual histories are with the permit fees here, and if you guys do an analysis of cost compared to revenue and things like that. I think you guys have a great system, and you've been doing a good job. I've been part of helping to improve that over the years within this community already. So that's why I can speak confidently on what Campton Hills is doing. We've done bits and pieces of that over the years here. So just my 2 cents.
So does that seem to meet the scope that you were looking for?
Yeah, it'll open it up to discussion. That's
Okay.
adequate. I don't know how much we really need, but it'll open it up to discussion.
All right.
That's adequate.
Thank you, Seth, for
Yeah,
coming
thank you,
out.
Seth. That was
Yeah, of
really
course.
interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hope everybody has a good night.
All right. All right, we will move on to Village Code update. C number 1, amend the Village Code, Section 2-4-1, Finance Committee appointment and duties, allowing the village board to appoint up to 2 of its own members to committee to fill vacancies. Anybody have a comment or a discussion on that?
I do.
Mhm.
During the budget process, there were a number of disconnects. And hard to understand exactly where, and no particular fingers pointed, but there were a number of disconnects. And at the end of the day, the board had to come up with a budget and pass it, right? We had a statutory requirement, and we had to come up with a budget and pass it. So at the end of the day, we held the bag. And part of the thought here when we were talking about this was that if we were, as a board, if we were more engaged in the budget process as it went, because it started out with the idea of, well, why don't they meet more often, right? Why don't they, meet more often? And then it turned into something different where we started to take more accountability and say, well, but why don't we engage more, right? Why aren't we more a part of this process? And I think that's a little bit how we got to this first item here. And then since proposing it, there's been a bunch of individual one-on-one conversation and input from other people, and research and so forth. And it turns out that we're not the only municipality to run into this situation where we find ourselves trying to figure out how we're going to manage our budget process when we weren't really involved in how we got there. And some other communities have decided that they would like to have some of their members on the finance committee. Some other communities have decided that they would actually like the finance committee to either be a subcommittee of the board or the finance committee to actually be a committee of the whole periodically, quarterly or something like that, so that the board is involved and engaged consistently throughout the budget year in this process. And so that's primarily, for me, where this came from. And I'm open to various different ways to get the board engaged more. This particular one is what we proposed a couple weeks ago, but a subcommittee of the board, a committee of the whole, these all seem like good options to me.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I make a comment as well?
Sure,
To
Frank,
me,
go ahead. We'll go to-
we should all do things as one, and it should be done in unison. And if we all have the same direction and the same goal, which really should be to do what's best for the residents of the village, why couldn't we have input not only from the board, but from volunteers and everybody else? And I don't really understand why somebody should feel threatened by that, whether it's a board member, or whether it's a chairperson, or whether it's a member of the board. And the committees need direction and need feedback. And I think it's important to have that. And I think the trustees can also provide a little checks and balances to make sure they're not being unduly influenced to go in a certain direction that maybe isn't in the best interest of the village. So to me, there's a lot of benefits to having us part of it, whether it's a voting member, non-voting member, ex officio, whatever. But to be able to participate, give feedback, and maybe lend a level of expertise, and also be the voice of the residents, because we're all the ones that are elected. We're out there in the public eye. The committee members aren't necessarily that. So people may come to us as their voice, in these committees. And that's why I think it's important. To me, if we have common goals and we're moving in the same direction as a community, everybody should be involved. And to take people out of it, I just think biases it a little bit. And, you know, the more ideas, the more opinions, the more resources that are available to these committees, I think makes the committee stronger. And that's just my opinion. And, you know, we're talking about the finance piece of it. I totally agree. I mean, coming as an outsider from the private sector to watch how that all unfolded was, I'll use the word embarrassing. It was embarrassing.
Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, so my stance, being on multiple committees and being a chair of one, there's a couple things here, the way it's written. And I think somebody else might come up and say something, but I don't think the committee, or the board can actually appoint its own, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's the president's job for appointment. We just kind of, you know, have input there, and, you know. you put
Advice
it
and consent.
Right, advice and consent. Now, I'll give you on finance. The budget this year, I'm not going to disagree. In my opinion, being a resident and watching how it wasn't, and even some of the lack of finance reports. I might be open to a committee of the whole quarterly, so that we're getting that input, we have some input, but I still think we have a very strong, very, very strong volunteerism in our committees. Putting board members, whether they're voting or not, in the room stifles the thinking and thinking out of the box. I personally would not have been happy having a board member sitting on any of my committees that I was on. I just, if it needs a liaison, fine. I might agree with the, again, committee of a whole, but I'm gonna tell you, every single one of these, I'm gonna say, I'm not in favor of putting a board member on there.
Can I ask a question? Why would you have that
What?
feeling? I mean, why is the board member a threat?
Well, let's see here, my cons. Perhaps too many cooks in the kitchen. Who's actually in charge? The board members would be intimidating to the volunteers. I'm pretty certain we'd lose some of our volunteers. We might lose whole committees in the process. For me, I'm a very hardworking woman. It would increase the trustees' load. If I want to attend a meeting because I want to see what's going on, which I do, I attended the finance
Yeah,
meetings.
you attend almost all the meetings.
Just about. But I don't want to have to do it if I don't want to. Summertime is super busy for me, so my thought of having to do 3 meetings in a week, no. I might have another meeting I need to go to. So as far as I feel that it puts the pressure on the volunteers if the trustees are in the room. Hence the reason why the previous board decided to take the liaisons from there. Now, I'm going to toot my own horn. That was probably because I was giving really good reports to you guys. But as to the structure and the mandating, that can come from the board and the village board president, that this is what you need to accomplish, here's your mandate. And, give them the specific direction. And, again, finance, committee of the whole, sure. I'd be in favor of that, but not placing board members on those boards.
I agree with you, Kim, and I think the key word that you said in your speech was the liaisons that were appointed to the boards. If we have the liaisons, we can attend any meeting. You don't even have to be a liaison. You can attend any meeting you want. You always have a chance to participate in those meetings. That's right, but you don't have to actually be appointed to a specific committee to attend. And being a liaison attends meetings to bring information back to the full board. So I definitely agree with you, Kim. Actually, Therese was next. She had her
So
hand
on
up.
the the first issue of whether or not we have trustees on committees, I'm with Kim 100% on that. I think it is redundant to put us on there, because at the end of the day, we're asking the community, and I think actually contrary to what Frank said, if we're looking for more input, we don't want to put ourselves there as well. So why are we everywhere? We're here to make the final decisions based on the recommendations that come from the committees. If the committees aren't doing their job, like we just experienced with this budget issue, then I think it's on us to get the committees back in line somehow or demand some accountability from them. But putting us on those committees, I just think is redundant, and I don't think it serves the point of sort of a check and balance as well. And we are a community of 10,000 people. We can fill these committees. We just need to get better at that and maybe reach out more to do that. Then there's a secondary issue. This is, and I'm going to be very clear, when I am here now as a trustee, and even though I have a legal background, if I'm talking legal stuff, I am not giving legal advice in any way, shape, or form. But I may sound like I am, but I'm going to tell you right now, it is my reading of something based on my position here as a trustee. But what I will tell you is in my reading of some of the Illinois Municipal Code, we can't take this responsibility from the president. It is in the municipal code that the mayor or the president of the village has the authority to do these appointments. Now, we then, as the kind of, so she's like the executive branch, right? And then we're the check and balance, we're the legislative branch, I guess, would be the easiest equivalent. Then it's our job to say, whatever her appointments are, we either agree or we don't. And we can get feedback, we can have discussion, we can talk about these people, we can say, I want to see the resume, I want to see the document, I want to see who's given information to the village. But at the end of the day, by municipal code, I can give you guys a section later on if you want to look it up. I'd rather not, though, because I'd rather have an attorney give you that. But it does clearly state that the mayor or the president has this, the authority to do this. So in all of these parts where we say the village, or that the trustees would make these appointments, I just don't believe that it's allowed in Illinois law. That's my belief, okay? And we also can't, even with the last one where you say we would require the president to appoint at least one or up to two members of the village board to the Planning and Zoning Commission, you can't in any way, shape, or form usurp that authority either. So you can't put limits on it, and you can't put parameters on it. And I also think it's way too self-serving for the board to demand that we are put on another commission. So it would almost be easier to justify or maybe work around if we were demanding, we want people from this neighborhood and this neighborhood and this neighborhood on a committee, but for us to demand that we go on these committees does not pass the check and balance kind of sniff test here at all, in my opinion. Now, this could be open for discussion, but I think that it's something that we need to talk about. And that is where I am on that.
Good, thank you. I think, Mike, were you next? Were you?
I think
Okay,
Janet
Janet, go ahead.
So firstly, I was trying to go in order, and we're all over the place. So had we gotten down to items 5 and 6, those of us who proposed these in the first place were going to move to not discuss items 5 and 6 regarding the police pension fund and the Planning and Zoning Commission. So we were limiting our discussion to items 1 through 4, and we had started out with item 1, and we've gotten, all the way down to the bottom of the list somehow. There's a lot of information flying around that just isn't consonant at all. So one trustee said that the prior board eliminated liaisons, which is not true. There was a proposal that was thrown out in the middle of discussion that someone thought that we shouldn't have liaisons. The board never moved to remove liaisons. Some committees have liaisons, some don't. There's a difference between a liaison and a member of the committee, and the difference is do you or do you not participate in the debate? And so I think what we're talking about here is not whether anyone on the board wants to be in charge of any of this stuff. It's, are you willing to do some of the work? And I appreciate, Trustee Muir's comments about the work that she does, and I acknowledge it, and I see that that's true. Just because one is appointed to a committee doesn't mean they have to attend every meeting. But it gives you the option, and it allows you to participate in the debate. If you're the liaison, I guess you could craft a liaison, position that allows you to participate in debate and not vote, but that's not something that we've had before. So liaison may or may not make an opening statement or respond to some questions about what the board is thinking about, and then may or may not convey information back to the board, but they don't really actively participate in debate. So, focusing on item 1, I would like to suggest that we consider amending the village code rather than to appoint our own members to fill vacancies, that we absorb the finance committee into the board and have a committee of the whole meeting as needed, whether that's quarterly. I don't know that it would be more often, but quarterly is more often than what we've been able to achieve so far. It's not, the intention here is to increase our engagement and our involvement and our accountability. Really no more than that. And so the other items are gonna kind of follow suit. I think we're gonna find that we all have sort of the same motivating principles behind the other committees. But I think we can skip down to item 3, the Public Works Committee, which is where we spend most of our money. And I have deep and abiding respect for our village engineer, but we get our information about what's happening in Public Works primarily from the village engineer, and we don't have a member of the board that is acting as a liaison or participating actively in those meetings. And I think we should, considering that's where we spend our money.
Okay, Nick and then Frank. Yeah.
So, one, I would just like to say that for all of our committee members, that we very much so value and appreciate them, and this is no reflection on any of the members of any committee. If this were to go through and board members were on any of the committees, I would hate for anyone to be offended by that or to take it personally, and hopefully we can make it clear that it's not. What I see this as is really a collaboration, and I feel like the negative comments have been like painting a negative picture on collaborating. It's the board who is, consistently involved in everything from intergovernmental agreements, policy to budget to road work. We have our hands in everything. And I would say quite often when proposals come from the committees, you can feel a disconnect. It's not that the committees didn't put 100% of their effort into it, but oftentimes they get here and we're dissecting the work that they did. And I really see this as a really valuable improvement, creating a conduit between the board and these committees, collaborating and bringing kind of that all-encompassing view that we get from being involved in so much into these committees. I think it would be very valuable. It would make things super efficient. It would answer a lot of questions before they even get asked. And I think it would be a great asset to all of the existing members on the committees. I think that they would appreciate having a board member working alongside of them. So I think this is a great idea.
Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Trustee Millette had a good idea as well, to talk to the chair people of the committees and have a discussion about it. First of all, I think that's important. Second of all, to trustee Hoffmansberger's point, I don't care if it's the village board or the village president or the mayor or whoever who makes the appointments. I would like to be more part of the process, though, instead of just having somebody nominated. I'd like to know who all the applicants are, or at least have an idea, so we can give some feedback to the president. Maybe she doesn't want it, I don't know, but it's her right. But as somebody on the board, I'd like to have the ability to at least give input, and suggestions. That's just my management style, how I do it at work. I'd like to get everybody's opinions before I make a decision. And obviously people are different, people have different viewpoints. But to trustee Beltner's point too, to me, I guess this village has, as long as I've lived in it, has had a lot of animosity and a lot of contention. And it seems to me that the threats that are being perceived are maybe part of that history. And I would propose that this be the first board that pushes out that we're a unified community and we all need to work together. And whether you're a board member, whether you're a resident, whether you're a chairperson of a committee, whether you're on the committee, whether you're a policeman, whether you're a fireman, whether you're the average Joe on the street, that we all come up with a common goal and a common vision for the village, and we all work together to achieve it. And to feel threatened by a trustee or somebody else, I think that culture needs to go away. It's a toxic culture. It's not a good culture to have as a village, and I think we need to get past that. And I think we should be the board that changes the vision of how we do things. That's just my opinion.
Well, I have one thing to say. My door is always open. Actually, the administrator, our Carmen, our representative, anybody can stop in at any time. Everybody has my cell phone number, even residents. I don't even use the phone that's in my office. They all have my personal cell phone number. They stop in to ask questions. We meet with them, and we try to fix any kind of issue that they may be having, whether it's possibly zoning or permitting, whatever it may be. So that's an insulting comment to me. I have to say this, I've spent 24 years on the county board representing this community, and a lot of the people in the audience have known me for many, many years. And I've always protected this community, and that's why people would come to me and issues that they would have, they would call me. I'd go out and see them and rectify the issue with the county, whatever it may have been, whether in the development department, water resource department. The point of putting trustees on our volunteer committees, I think, is a terrible idea. I think that we would lose a lot of volunteers if we did this. I understand kind of what Nick is saying, but again, they know our door's always open as well. We have had committee members stop into our office and meet with us and ask questions or give us information. If this was done back in 2007, when the village was originally formed by President Patsy Smith, I think that it was formed that way and people would understand it, but I think today we have volunteers that have been on our committees for many, many years, and now we're going to say, well, you know, instead of just being a liaison, we want to be there to have a vote and to kind of oversee what's going on. I don't think, personally, I don't think it's a good idea. But go ahead, Therese.
So I just wanted to address the.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
Oh, I'm
You'll be
sorry. Do you want to go next?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Just the input question from Frank, and I guess I'm a little confused by that because we have the opportunity to provide input and ask questions when we are deciding what, let's say it's on the agenda and it says we're going to appoint someone to this committee, we have a time for discussion at that point. So if there's information that you don't have or haven't seen, we, put a motion to table it until you've seen the information. We have that ability, so I don't know I don't know what you would want added on to what we already do, the process that is already taking place, which is, the president makes a decision on who she wants to appoint onto a committee, which is something that's a right that she's given by the state statutes. And then we have the opportunity then, when the meeting takes place, to have a discussion back and forth. Either we looked at this resume, we like it, we don't like it, we want more information, we either take a vote or we say we're going to table it. I don't know what else we need from her on that. The authority's been given to her, it's been given to the president. She's the executive of this community. We are then, our check and balance is then to decide whether or not that person should be on that committee. So we have that opportunity to say no. And if a majority of us say no, then that person does not make it on that committee. And that's how it's supposed to work. So I'm not quite sure what information we aren't entitled to that we aren't already getting, is my point on that.
Mike, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you, President. Wojnicki, my joke's gonna land flat, but I was gonna try to lighten up the mood. I'll try it anyway. I was gonna say, you had me trustee Benetti till you said fireman, but anyway. Sorry, I kid. My longstanding instinct has been exactly what Trustee Muir said, and that doesn't mean it's right. That I've always had that. The initial, when we formed, we wanted to get as much citizen involvement as we could, so we had a lot of committees. We're now down to, notwithstanding 3 committees here, the other ones are required by statute. We don't have to have finance, we don't have to have community relations, we don't have to have public works committee. So when I saw the proposal and I thought about it, and I did have a conversation with Trustee Benetti, and our experience, possibly because we spent a lot of our lives in DuPage, was it in my experience was what was the committee's purpose, whether the board or the council, because Downers is still called the council, had involvement. And by way of example, and I'm sorry I'm being that old guy that tells you about the stories, but I am old now. Excuse me. In Lombard, the Parking and Transportation Committee had authority from the village board to set speed limits, adopt stop signs, parking regulations. Those never went to the village board. The committee did it. There was a trustee on that committee because they were granting them some of their executive authority. So that made a lot of sense that that to some of the suggestions that we're talking about, direction, flow, and who would be the person at that body, make sure that things were done in accordance with the village statute at that point, so then they'd be defensible if they ever got challenged in court. And in other towns, I would ask, what is the problem or not, I don't want to say what's the problem I'm trying to solve. What is the action that we're looking for to either correct or add or enhance by having one of us 6 that have this job, as Trustee Hoffensberger was mentioning, we are the final say, from what we are calling advisory committees. So to that extent, from community relations, they have we sort of grant them a budget. We said, here's the budget and please spend it wisely, but everything that they want to spend it on comes back through us. And so is that, would we be infringing upon their thinking out of the box if we were there? Sorry, I forgot about information technology. Same concept there. Now, where I'm starting to maybe open my eyes from what I had been thinking before is the issue we've had with finance. And sometimes that's been a quorum thing too, so then having a member of this could potentially help that meet quorum, or if it became if it was a committee of us, acting as committee of the whole or something, then do we still want that knowledge that we have in those members that are currently on the finance committee? So I guess what I'm really getting at is maybe we should think about what we want these committees to do for us as the legislative body. Are they incubators of free thought? If we want them to be incubators of free thought, we have to let them think free to a certain extent. We give them a parameter, we give them a budget in some cases, or we give them a topic, or we give them a range of topics and say, please advise us on these things, IT being a good one. Tell us what are the threats coming, what do we need to be aware of, et cetera, et cetera. However, when we talk about, and to your point about Trustee Person about Public Works, I am the liaison, I think still of Public Works. And to what Trustee Muir said when she was on that body, I showed up when I was asked to show up. Sometimes it was pathetic in that I felt so bad. One meeting I was coming to and it was snowing, ironically. And so I was trying to call in. But when we started that committee way back when, I grabbed somebody who was an engineer and asked him to chair the committee, so I never worried about his thought process of things. And now we've got Scott there as far as the technical part of it. But to the point that we're talking about visioning how to spend biggest chunks of our cash, then yeah, maybe we want to look at a different hybrid. So should these be subcommittees of this body as opposed to just advisory? If they are subcommittees of this body, one of us should be on that subcommittee, right? Either as the chair of said subcommittee or as an ex officio, if we wanted to go that route. And if they are an advisory committee that we are just wanting to be a sounding board, we want them to be that emerging look-on thing, then we have a liaison that could report back, or if the chair of the subcommittee wants to take on that task, John Bavari's been here doing that at times, then we don't need to fix that. It's not broken, I think, but it does seem like we all agree there's something we need to improve on finance. And how many towns have a finance committee that is a cow, that it's just the body politic itself? I can't remember if we had them in other towns I've been in. I think we have. And were they subcommittees? Maybe. Again, when you have that much of direct input to our policy, right, the things the finance committee does, either introduce policy or act on our policy or push the boundaries of our policy, then perhaps that's the one we should look at exploring a tighter relationship. But if we're strictly looking at community events and we're looking at IT, I'm not sure that there would be a benefit to being more interlaced with what they're doing. And being a public works guy, I could certainly see if there's a difference in if we wanted to, using the example I gave you before of Lombard, if there's a certain amount of the maintenance, let's say the maintenance, if there's a certain amount of the routine maintenance, we would say, okay, delegate to do these following things, but the capital, the resurfacing, the big projects still come back to us, because then that alleviates us of some of that minutia when we're debating some of this stuff. So then if that's the case, then maybe we do have an integration of a trustee that somehow sits on that committee. So maybe first thing should do is decide what do we want each of these committees to be doing for us. Confirm, not decide. Confirm what we want each of these committees to do for us. And then if it's important enough to our operation, should they then be a subcommittee? Or, to the other point, should we say, you know what, we can do it ourselves if we do it quarterly, if we do it in some other way. Thank you for your service. We truly appreciate you, take that role on ourselves. So how we would do that, I mean, is that a small working group of us that take a look at our board structure and make recommendations, perhaps? Is it and the conversation I did have with Trustee Bernetti is talk to the committees that are around now. Maybe they do want this. I mean, I think Trustee Muir's right especially I think in the freedom of the group not to have dad and mom watching them type of thing for maybe those that we need that kind of stuff. But then who's spending the allowance, maybe, yeah, at that point, and it's not that we have any problem, the quorum issue, right? And there was some confusion on direction, and that probably could have been nipped or righted faster if there was a more closer relation. I could see that being a benefit. So maybe, and are there any committees we're missing? I mean, we've had others in the past that, we had some ad hocs that started, that did their job and retired. Or do we want to repurpose or add something to the portfolio of a couple of that we have already to extend, to give us more feedback and to get more community involvement?
Uh-oh. Chief?
Just one quick thing, your Community Relations Committee liaison and is overseen by the police department. So myself and Stavi attend every meeting. Before you guys even get expenditures for them, they're actually reviewed by me, just to make sure, which they do a great job, that they line up with the few events that we have a year. So I'm just throwing it out there in your consideration of all these committees. The Community Relations one is overseen by the police department, is attended by the police department. They do a great job. We support them, however, but we work really good together. So just on that committee.
I'm sorry, could I jump in real quick? That's the other thing I forgot, is it's a staffing issue for us too. Because I was staff liaison as a job to that Parking and Transportation Committee when I was in Downers and when I was in Lombard, and also, there was an engineering set. So that might be the click too, is not to have the administrator have to be at every one of these subcommittee meetings, or the chief to be at every one of them, or something like that. That might be the other decision point we talk about is, are we doing this to fill in where we are short-staffed, so we don't have a staff member that would guide the discussion? Because that was my job as a staff member, was to guide the discussion on the committees that I liaised. But not to interfere with it. If the chair wanted to go down whatever road he or she went down, they went. But then I would, next morning, call the boss. That's what they did last night. So if that's part of the disconnect we want to see, and maybe that's the reason we want to have a trustee liaise or something more than a liaise, maybe that's something we can talk about in that discussion. But if it's truly like I said, if it's truly just a brainstorming committee we want stuff from, I think they can handle themselves.
Okay, our clerk wants to speak for a moment.
To trustee Millet's point, when I did work here as a deputy clerk, I was attending those daytime meetings here, part of economic development, and some of those various, the deputy clerk filled in as the staff liaison.
All right.
Here, I'll just want to go on record. I did not mean to insult you, and if it came across that way, I apologize.
Thank you.
I just wanted to understand the process better. And, I was just referring specifically to what happened at the last meeting, because I didn't feel like I had the ability to do that, and now that I know that I do, I will. But I just wanted to apologize to you, because I did not mean it to be insulting. It was more an observation.
Thank
So.
you. Carmen, are you going to add anything?
Sure. I mean, the last few items were removed, I guess it was the last two items were removed from the code, so, or from the agenda, but having seen the agenda, I took a look at those two, and as has been stated a little bit already, there are some statutory requirements. In the police pension fund, for instance, it has statutory requirements for who must be on that fund. Two of those appointments are by the village president, and while technically they could be members of the board, I'd highly advise against it, because from time to time, the village will intervene in pension applications before the police pension fund, which would really put you in direct conflict with the members who are then voting on that application. It's not on this list, but just to speak to the rest of your committees, the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners, those members, you can't be an elected or appointed officer of a municipality and also sit on a BFPC. So for the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is in your community or in this community is a combined plan commission and a ZBA, the village president certainly has the authority to appoint plan commission members, which is in the Illinois Municipal Code. And I would advise against having village board members on the PZC simply because you're taking part in what is a due process hearing by an applicant, and then that applicant is then coming back to the village board for final action. The rest of these committees, I mean, you already have in 241, the finance committee provision that no more than one member of the village board may be appointed as a member of the finance committee. So, there's precedent there. In the communities I work with, it's kind of a hybrid. You have committee of the whole, as has been stated here, either in all the way up to large cities, down to small communities. You have subcommittees of the village board, that might be 3 members of the village board that serve on that specific committee. You see that often in school boards and in library boards. More often, park boards, more often than you do in village boards, but it does happen occasionally. And then, rather than a liaison, having 1 to 2 members of the village board serving on a committee that is also comprised of other volunteers or staff members, that happens as well. Some of the communities I work with do have that function. Sometimes the other members, more often than not, the other members on those committees are not usually volunteers. They're usually, like, for instance, like an economic development committee or a public works committee might be 2 trustees, the public works director, the village engineer, and a staff member. So I haven't seen it. I'm sure it may exist out there where you have 2 village board members and then some volunteers, but more likely it's typically internal. I know some communities that use that for their finance committee. They have 2 trustees who then report back to the village board at every meeting or every other meeting. You have the finance director, and you might have some other member of the staff, maybe another department head sometimes. So the rest of these committees, there are no statutory requirements as to who serves on them. But as Trustee Uppensberger said, that the appointment power is one of the few powers of a village president, in addition to the limited power to vote when there's a tie or a supermajority is required. So.
Okay, anything else? Okay. Do we move on, or do you want to take a vote on any of these tonight? Direction, which way to go?
Maybe we would like to have some more discussion.
What's that?
Well, maybe we bring it back, have more discussion.
Yeah, I think
with
at
fo-
another meeting.
Focused on more on like, what committee structure do we want? Start with that.
And let's look at the 2 that we're focused on, finance and
Start with Public Works and Finance. Yeah, that makes sense. I'd be good with that.
And I think it'd be a good idea to have the chairman of those committees attend our meeting and get their, opinion on what they think. Because actually, the 2 chairs of Public Works and Finance, the chairs have been chairmen on those committees for many, many years already. So I think they would really give us good input. So, okay. All right.
Additional comments, I'm not listed there, but I did have the engineer I wanted to have him give a general report of where he's at with the roads and the contract. So it can advise if we're going to have that meeting on the 17th, we could take some action. Scott, if you just give the overview of where you're at.
Sure. I do owe you a contract for design services for the road project. The list of roads is what was presented at the prior board meeting. We would put that together for your approval. Given that you're using journal funds for it, it'll be fairly quick for us to put that together. So I have no concerns about getting that out this year. If it's okay, I'm actually out of town next week. Since it's would be on consent, could we add it on the 26th agenda?
If that's all right we're talking about the same roads, but what's your estimate so far internally if we did all the listed roads? And then separate rejuvenation versus chip seal too.
Right, because rejuvenation was approved earlier this evening. Taking out Connors, I think we're at about 650 with all the roads that were listed. which I know is above what the village is looking to expend. As we finalize and put it together, we can always go out to bid with a contract that's a little larger than your budget, and if it comes in at that price, we can deduct a roadway or two if necessary. So I actually do like to bid a project that's a little bit larger than the available funds. Just if prices come in good, we're able to capture as much road work.
Yeah, I just wanted to get the board, I gave him that direction, but I said I need consensus from this group before I go to 650 when that wasn't the number that I was given to spend. But if, knowing that you can deduct on the 26th if it comes in too high for the amount of money you want to use from the general fund, unrestricted fund balance to pay for it. Because as we said before, it's not out of MFT. This is general fund. That's why it can be done in a much more expedited form. It doesn't need to go to Schaumburg and IDOT.
Right. It's always easier to deduct a roadway from a contract than to come back and add additional roadways into it. So that's why we like to bid just a little bit larger than, so.
Right. And then the chip seal, can you give an update where you might be able to get more bids or a pricing from KDOT?
Sure. The Campton Township Highway District was having some struggles with getting pricing from contractors and getting responses. So what was in tonight's packet were the only ones that came in. A couple of contractors did not respond. However, today they were able to get in contact with KDOT, which does also do a chip seal program. So they're going to be talking with a contractor doing that. So they look to be able to have additional information to bring to the board for approval at a subsequent, possibly the 17th board meeting.
We do it on the same, the 26th probably.
Okay. So it's just a matter of timing of not getting responses from the contractors is why it was pulled from tonight's agenda.
Is there a consensus generally to have that program as he's outlined ready for the 26th for consideration? Right. Thank
Okay.
you for coming, Scott.
Sure.
And
Thank
have a
you.
good trip. Stay out of the smoke in Canada.
That's the
Mark,
plan.
Did you want to touch on Fox
Oh,
Mill?
I'm sorry. You know, there's the other topic that you've been working for me to get an SSA potential from the Fox Mill Homeowner Association because of the larger cost involved, and they have to do the sidewalks first, then we bid the road, and there's been this back and forth, which goes first, and you were trying to get some pricing. So if
Right.
they wanted to as the HOA, go forward to establish an SSA for the roads and the sidewalk, and we could possibly give that some consideration. And Scott is trying to work up some estimates.
Right. So we do have some estimates pretty well finalized, and what actually makes sense, I believe, is you do the sidewalk work. This is basically ADA work, intersections, the sidewalk and the roadway work as part of the resurfacing project. You do the returns, you do the curb and gutter, you do the sidewalk, and have the HOA reimburse the village for the expense. I'm not suggesting that you have the HOA do the actual contracting and do the work. Included in the road project, but it is going to take some time for them to come up with the funds. So that's why we're asked to put together the overall potential cost for this. I forget there's like 170 some intersections, ramps necessary in the whole subdivision. So it adds up to a fairly sizable cost.
And would the board consider an SSA if they voted themselves to do that, to do it as a holistic project? And I think Mike said that there's some experience that the board previous did on some stormwater on SSAs.
Yeah, I forgot it from my previous comments, but I don't know of a management company for an SSA anywhere that really wants to talk about having to resurface their own roads if they don't have to, or try to get contracts when they don't have to, and potentially deal with the state when they don't have to. Yeah, the analogy that we used where we helped Nancy Lane and others is we were interfacing with, at that point, county stormwater and township to make that smooth, and we we also get, if we, in this case for an SSA, if they're floating a note for it, we will get better rates as a municipality, backing that with SSA proceeds, and they would get trying to borrow from a bank on their own. So I think those are those benefits that I forgot to mention when we were talking about the previous one. Sorry, but to the sequencing, yeah, I think that makes sense, because the ADA ramps are required to be to the current standards, because they're in our right-of-way. And the difference in the places that, the rest of the town that don't have curbs, that don't have sidewalks, is, that would be, to your point, Administrator Rooney, is in SSA, 51% of electors, 51% of property owners can object to it. If they know polling themselves that's not going to happen, then we absolutely can facilitate that happening and get that set up the same way that would then be on the other bigger subdivision.
And then the project would be a unified project and address some stormwater issues that are under some of those curbs that are failing, so that it'd be a unified project. I just want to make sure, if I go forward with doing this, and I'm going to reach out and have a meeting with the HOA president, that we definitely could provide both the SSA, if they had the votes to do it, and if we went forward, then we would do a bond in the name of the SSA of, for Fox Mill. But the other caveat I would say to that is, if they did go forward to vote themselves in a property tax to address both the roads and the curbs and the sidewalks, stormwater, that we would put some provision in understanding that if there was ever a village-wide bond,
They're out of it.
they wouldn't be exempt for 22 years or
Whatever.
23 years, what we would determine the useful life of said road and curbing, so that they didn't vote themselves something and then a later board, 5 years, 10 years down, did a citywide, they wouldn't get double tapped.
Yeah, Clarendon Hills did that before I got there. The last thing, I'm sorry, my brain's working so slow tonight. The last thing is, this is in comport with the township originally too. The township said at the beginning, when Fox Mill came in as a subdivision, before the village existed, because there's still some concerns about what's the village causing me to do this type of thing. Norrin at the time was very clear, I'm not going to pay for those streetlights, I'm not going to pay for those sidewalks, I'm not going to pay for those curbs. So this is nothing different because we're a village now. This has always been the situation that the folks, when they bought the property, should have known about it, whether they did or not. That's always an issue. So it's not the village infringing upon their rights. It's not the village doing anything dastardly. We're trying to help by using our borrowing power, authority, expertise, all those sorts of things on a part of the right-of-way that they are obligated to maintain by the covenants and restrictions on their deeds.
And if
We're
I
just
could,
looking to see there's nobody would object to us pursuing this. Okay, so we'll keep going forward,
okay.
Scott.
And I do want to add, because of the miles of streets in that neighborhood, and the varying condition, this is not everything be done in 1 year.
No.
This is going to be over a multiple period of years. As a neighborhood gets to a certain condition, it would be first, second, third type of thing. So, but we're in the process of summarizing all the miles of streets, amount of sidewalk and such, so.
Kim, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, Scott, if we're capable of doing the ADAs on that, is it possible then to get a KCOM grant for Fox Mill Boulevard?
At the present time, no. When we submitted, it was considered eligible. However, it would have, KCOM would have required, or the state would have required the elimination of several of the stop signs along Fox Mill, which the village at that time determined was not the route they wanted to go. So it was not classified as a collector roadway eligible for KCOM funding. Long answer, short answer is no.
Nobody stops at the stop signs anyway.
So.
There you go. Go ahead, Janet.
There various ADA grants, and in this particular case, I know so many times we're not eligible for various different grant programs, but would the ADA improvements fall under the Safe Routes to Schools program if we were to apply for that?
That would be
In the vicinity
that
of
would
the
be a
school?
stretch. Safe Route to School works very well when you're filling in gaps to connect from point A to point, here's your neighborhood, here's your school, and you can't walk there. To fill in a gap, Safe Route to School works really, really well. For something like this, which is more maintenance, I'm going to say it's probably a real stretch to, for something like that. It's still ADA, but it's not going to rank as well as something that's connecting. You can't get from point A to point B without an unsafe walking condition. So, possible, wouldn't hold up really high hopes for it though.
Right.
But it's something we can look into.
So I want to make sure I have consensus, the board, to continue down this route and bring it back to you before we execute anything, obviously.
Okay,
Okay.
oh, wait,
Just
Kim's got one more.
One more thing. We're positive that all the ADA is in our right of way.
Yes,
yeah.
but by their covenants, they're a responsibility of the HOA, not,
Okay.
because it can't be a responsibility of the village, because the village didn't exist when the county approved the HOA.
Okay, I just wanted to clear, because I was trying to remember, we've had this discussion before, when we were trying to get them on the KCOM grants. Well, I didn't have it, I was in the room, let's put it that way. Anyway,
Yeah, but
that was the only thing.
okay. There's a variety of conditions to be addressed. You have old design standards. You have bike paths that connect to a road crossing without any dome panels. In cases, there's a sidewalk on one side of the street and no receiving sidewalk on the other. There's, sidewalks that lead to nowhere, and there's areas there are no crossings. So there's a variety of issues to be cleaned up comprehensively with this.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, the HOA there understands it, is in agreement with it, and wants it to be over multiple years, just from an expense standpoint. So, so they understand the sidewalks, the ADA, it's the roads that will be new, so, but they're already in agreement, so just so everybody on the board knows, they've already agreed to do it, so.
Okay. Great step. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Scott. Lastly, number 7, comments from president, trustees, and village attorney. And I know Chief Levand has a report he's been waiting to give us.
Well, I'll save my police report for the month until the next meeting.
Okay.
Just a couple things real fast. The next board meeting, the new full-time lateral hire Officer Foote will be sworn in. Yesterday, the police department took part in the Route 64 on 6-4 Traffic Safety Initiative, which took place through DuPage County, Kane County, and over 30 agencies from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So that was successful. It wasn't only about writing citations. There was a lot of education that went along with it, but it accomplished what we were looking for throughout 2 counties. So it was a lot of good joint work between different agencies. And finally, I know we discussed this previously with ILETSB, the body cam grant. So they suggested we try 24 and 25 because of how it fell within the guidelines. So they came back and, of course, they said, well, no, we won't award the 24-25, which was $48,000, but they did give us, signed the paperwork yesterday on it, $24,909 to cover all our body cam and squad camera costs for 25. So we're hoping to get lucky and get both between the 2 years, but at least we were successful in getting an entire year paid for. Another positive to it is Christina did a lot of work on it. There were some tweaks. It got kicked back from ILETSB. Now we have our template. So every year going forward, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We know what they need, what they want. And every year, you're eligible for it. Every agency in the state And they actually have a bill that is out right now to increase what they're giving agencies for it by a substantial amount. I think it's a little over 8 million. So I'm pretty confident going forward, this will be something that we'll continue to get with it. So it wasn't the exact amount I was hoping for in the long shot, but it was still $25,000, which covers the yearly cost on it.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And no need for closed session, and motion to adjourn.
I'll motion.
Moved by Kim.
Second.
I guess the discussions have been good tonight. I need a second.
Second.
Gave you a second.
Nick got second. All in favor?